It never rains in Los Angeles. But when the sky gives out this gift, the city becomes enchanted. Residents stay indoors as cypress trees soak up the rainwater like sponges, and citrus gets some motivation to produce more fruit in the next year. Gutters and washes overflow, carrying months of sediment out into the ocean. The hills become covered with green grasses, and the air becomes clean. Sunsets are painted in deep hues of vermilion and lilac with streaks of billowy clouds. Amongst other things, it makes me want to paint. I am a 3D computer graphics artist by trade, but a very reluctant one. As the years go on, what I've found frustrating about digital art is the persistent, superfluous change. To say nothing of the business model of continual payment, if we provide digital toolmakers the benefit of the doubt and assume that progress is the real motivating factor, then we are still left with a conundrum all the same. The tools continue to change. What I mean by this is that if I were to pick up my paintbrush, as I am here, I can assume that my paint will always perform in the same fashion. I can rely on my brushes to deliver a consistent experience, either good or bad, or anywhere in between, but consistent. As I learn to use the tools, I can eventually master them, even bad tools, and once mastered, they are forever mastered. This is not, and will never be, the case for digital tools. With each passing year, a new version, a new thing to learn, a change to the layout, an altered pressure curve, a removed feature, the concept of reliability and consistency does not exist. It requires that the artist continue a lifelong commitment to relearning tools, rather than mastering old ones. And this does not end with a stubborn adherence to a specific version either. Eventually, the system will need to be upgraded for security purposes, and so too the dated, reliable tool. I don't mean to sound bitter. I'm not. I understand the push for progress. I think that artists do very well to separate their careers from their hobbies. Not all art needs to be a career, and having separation can be liberating. More and more, what we are seeing is a very clear delineation between the two. But what gets lost in this unending effort for change is the availability to step back in time and choose the older methods. I am doing my best with the available tools, but since this process has not been done since the early aughts, I am forced to make some material choices that are, shall we say, less than ideal. Traditional cells used specific vinyl paint, but I must make do with mixing up acrylic. Acme punched paper and celluloid is the industry method for keeping pages aligned, but while I still have a peg bar, finding the punched acetate sheets is impossible. So I've resorted to store-bought transparencies, and still, after some tests, I am confident this project will turn out. Even so, the acrylic is thin and brittle by comparison. It requires much more to be applied for full opacity. Animation was traditionally drawn on paper and then photographed. Cartoons such as Gertie the Dinosaur and Little Nemo had to be redrawn entirely on each frame, including backgrounds. This was not just a lot of work, but also inconsistent and limited background complexity. It wasn't until Earl Hurd came up with the cell animation process in 1914 that the industry shifted into a golden age of animation. Because backgrounds and characters could be drawn separately, artists could focus more time on a single background painting rather than redrawing it hundreds of times. Disney innovated this process in many ways, but the concept changed not just the viability of animation, but the aesthetics of it, even today. Then in 1989, Disney first used digital ink and paint on a single shot of The Little Mermaid. This was a pivotal moment for the industry, which then hurriedly forgot this traditional analog process. Every Disney animated feature from this point forward was created using a digital ink and paint process, having never looked back. A decade later, the Japanese animation industry followed in the early aughts. And today, there are no studios left which use cells for ink and paint. And there is something warm and nostalgic about this cell animation look. The limited color palette, the bold chalky tones with blocked out shading, even the slight shadow under the layers of celluloid evokes a joyful feeling of simpler times. Animation backgrounds have traditionally been painted in gouache or poster color. At the time this technique was developed, oil paints would not have been suitable because of the long cure time, and acrylic paint had not been invented yet. Water-based gouache was a natural choice. Today there are still studios who paint their backgrounds by hand using gouache, albeit not very many. The most noteworthy is Studio Ghibli. Even despite the speed that can be achieved with digital tools, there is a deep affinity for hand-painted scenery. Perhaps it's the simplicity, or the texture, or the limited palette and dynamic range. Or perhaps all of the tiny imperfections add up to remind us that someone created this by hand. And we like having that human connection with the artist. When I was in high school, I intended to train to be either an animator or a comic book artist. I had read a lot of comics and had consumed every bit of Japanese animation that I could get my hands on. I was not very proficient drawing characters, but I had the motivation and drive to become better. When it came time to further my studies in college, I was lost. I wouldn't say that I necessarily chose the wrong school, but more likely I had not really done my research. Had I had the guidance to direct me further, I might have joined California Institute of the Arts, Ringling College, or Pasadena Art Center. But I self-assuredly entered the only art school I had applied to, which was Otis College of Art and Design. It is in no way a bad school. It has produced a number of well-known and talented artists who continue to lead their respective industries. For me, however, it was not the perfect fit for what I eventually found that I wanted to do. But it did lead me here. While I was at Otis, a man named Harry Mott was the director of their fairly new digital media program. He is a kind and gentle soul, very much like a father figure. His focus on modern technology brought relevance to all of the pupils who partook of his curriculum. This focus is what thrusted me and many others into computer graphics as an alternative to traditional art forms. I still took traditional hand-drawn animation courses, but they were modest and far removed from a vocational reality. I took him aside when I first met Harry and asked for his advice on my career path. What he said was life-changing. He told me that comic books are a wonderful art form, but that the artists often don't make much money, and that oftentimes a well-paid career can fund other artistic ventures. This seemingly simple sentiment caused a chasm to form between what I enjoy doing as a hobby and what I am able to do professionally. Make no mistake, working as an artist is work, hard work. Doing what one enjoys every day at the request of someone else does eventually wear out the luster of making art for a living. What Harry told me is an important reminder to treasure the things that I love. After that, I went into 3D graphics, lighting to be exact, not because I loved it, but because I could persist in it. I was detached enough to do it for someone else. It has been 19 years since that conversation, and I have built a career on an art form that I do not love. I rarely get to create at work anymore. I'm mostly managing artists and productions today, but the upside is that now I have the creative stamina to spend on painting when I want to paint. As I finish up my background painting, I must ensure that both the cell and the background are perfectly dry before I test them out. Any amount of moisture could cause one or the other to stick.